Hello everyone, welcome to Filmcopath. We hope all of you are doing well and keeping safe. The esteemed guest whom we have with us today is considered to be one of the pillars of the alternate aesthetics in Indian cinema. His debut feature film Ankur is a modern masterpiece which introduced Indian viewers to the side of cinema which they had seldom seen. The cinema rooted in real India with real people dealing with real circumstances. Many regard it to be the revival of the alternate cinema movement in India. He has made several award winning documentaries and movies in his career spanning 5 decades now. He has been decorated with the Dada Saheb Phalke Award and has won the National Award 8 times. Today, we have with us Padma Bhushan, Mr. Shyam Benegal. Thank you, sir, for giving us this unique opportunity to interact with you.
Thank you.
Sir, I wanted to talk to you about the ban on Nishant and your meeting with Indira Gandhi, which eventually lifted the ban.
Yeah.
So, what was that about?
Well, you see, when I met Nishant, one of the things was that it so happened that the emergency, there was suddenly in 1975, soon after I made the film, and I had gone to the census for a census certificate. At that time, Mrs. Gandhi had the emergency kind of announced, so which meant that a lot of things couldn't be done then. So the census became hyperactive. And so when the film was shown to the board, to the certification board, at that time it was not called the certification board, it was called the censor board. So when the censor saw the film, they said, "Oh my God, this is a film that is a call for a revolution." And they immediately linked it to the emergency. And so they banned it. I mean, there was no question about it. They just banned it. And when they banned it, it was very difficult because, you have several stages, as you know, when you go to the censor board. First stage, if there is some doubt about it, then it will be sent up to a revising committee. They will see it and so on and so forth. There are 2 or 3 stages before the government takes action. And it goes out of the hands of the board itself. Now, in this case, what had happened was that the film was banned. And there was no recourse in the censor board anymore. So the only way I could get the ban removed was to appeal either to the Minister of Information Broadcasting. And at that time, you see, there was the Minister for Information and Broadcasting was also the Prime Minister of the country.
Okay.
No? So, and it was also the time of emergency, not the meaning it was. So the thing was that I had to directly ask the Prime Minister, and nobody else in between. So I did go to the Secretary to the Prime Minister and explained the film to him and so on and so forth. And I said, "Can I have the Prime Minister see my film?" You see, because Mrs. Gandhi used to like watching films. She used to choose films to see from time to time. And so I said, I would like her to see this film, before such a drastic action is taken against her. So what happened was, I don't know whether she saw the film or not, but certainly while it was, no, I think she did see the film, because now, it's so long ago, I don't quite remember what happened, but one thing I do know, that I went to Delhi. I said, I must have a screening for the Prime Minister. And so there was a screening organized for the Prime Minister, but I wasn't allowed to be in the theatre at that time.
Okay.
With her to explain anything that was necessary. It was just a screening for her. And at the end of the show. Of course, there was nothing was told to me. But so I said I took an appointment to meet her, in the Parliament, her Parliament office. And so I went there to meet her. And so I was waiting outside in her, where the bureaucrats sit, outside the Prime Minister's office. So I was sitting there. And then a message was sent to me saying that, yes, could you send him in? So I went in to meet her. And the first question she asked me was, why do you think your film was bad? I said, I'm not quite sure why. So she said, it's embarrassing, for people to ban films like this. No, she told me that. Clearly. So obviously, she said she didn't want the film to be banned. But she said, if there is, since it's come all the way to the Prime Minister's office, so something has to be done. But as far as she was concerned, she said, it's fine, you can have the film released. But the chairman of the censor board, it would be embarrassing for him and his position. So he decided that I should have a card before the film started.
A disclaimer, yes.
A disclaimer at the beginning that these things happened before India became.
Before India's independence.
And so I said, people will laugh if they see this.
Exactly.
But he said, well, if you want it, I'll put it in. Nothing, the film remained untouched, of course. So that silly little card used to come in the beginning of the film and then at the end of the film when it was released. Yeah. But it went and won an international award, so the question did not even arise. Yeah.
That disclaimer kind of becomes a meta layer because we clearly understand it's from independent India, but it says, and it makes you feel that, that something must have happened there.
Yeah. So anyway, it was very silly, but these things also happen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sir, now I wanted to come to Suraj Ka Satvan Ghoda. So I think we all can agree that Dharmveer Bharti's story, from which is adapted, is a pretty complex one, and it is not easy to adapt. Also, the hyperlinked narrative that you chose for the film was not so much explored at that time as it is today, of course. So how did you and the scriptwriter Shama Zaidi conceive this idea for this film, which was clearly quite difficult to do, actually?
You see, with Ka Satvan Ghoda was a huge challenge. Was a huge challenge even for me, and I was very interested in doing a story of that kind, of doing a kind of having a series of ambiguities also, apart from everything else.
Yes.
So to work on a script like that, and but what was interesting to me was that how, because as you know, there are different points of view, same story. You can see it from different positions, because then each one has a certain, there are a series of subjectivities.
Yes.
So and all those subjectivities together, when you put it together, that's when something becomes objective.
Correct.
So here we are looking at something from a series of subjective positions, and to me this was very exciting to do something like that, and attempting to do that, but I wasn't quite sure whether it would work, whether the audiences would get very, mixed up, whether it would come across clearly to an audience or not. So anyway, I got an opportunity because fortunately it was the NFDC that also supported the film, because it was a private producer had done, they wouldn't have supported a film like that at that time. Anyway, I didn't get the amount of money that I would have liked to have, but it didn't matter because we made this film anyway. And Shama's script worked out very well also. But she understood exactly what I was trying to do. And so together, the whole thing worked. And we had, I think we had great performances as well. And it was Rajat Kapoor's first film. And everybody who was in it was absolutely first.
Yeah.
And I think it still is. I mean, it still holds. In that film, if it's shown, it still holds. And I think in that sense, it worked well. And of course, it also did reasonably well at the box office. But but it had its premiere, of course, on television rather than in the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sir, if I talk about Suraj Ka Satvan Ghoda, and I also, we just spoke about ANKUR. There's a very interesting observation I had is, the witness in ANKUR, by the end of the film, what we see him doing is, kind of sprouting that revolt. Whereas in Suraj Ka Satvan Ghoda, it's the weakness. If I consider, Manik Mullah, he's always reticent. He's never taking that step. So is it fair to think that, from the from the middle class, it's very difficult to take that step, whereas it's much easier for people who really do not have, the have-nots as we think about this society. Is it something if we think of these two films in contrast?
Of course, you can. Because one is a middle class attitude and the other one is a working class attitude.
Yeah.
When you have a whole world to gain if you have nothing to lose. But if you've got something to lose, you'll never get the world. You will be stuck with what you have. So it does have that sort of situation. Yes, it was in some ways correct, I guess. We thought about it.
Yep. And there is also a very interesting, kind of a Marxist ideology, personally, I felt there's always this class struggles where we see, that's again my interpretation. It's like these three ladies, they belong to different classes, socio-economic classes. And there is this person, Maheshwar Dalal, Amrish Puri's character, who is just having some resources without a character, without some education. But that person is kind of determining the fate of all these three ladies. So is it that, the weakest and, the lowest, say, Rajit Kapoor's character says, Suraj Ka Satvan Ghoda will determine what your society progresses. It is something coming from there?
Of course it does. You can interpret it, in a Marxist way, if you like. Because, it's open to many interpretations. It depends on the time. It also depends on the time when you see the film. Meaning the epoch,
right?
Time in those terms. Because today when you see the film, it's not necessarily likely to. Your response may not be exactly the way it was when you saw the film when it was made. Bound to change. But it's a very good story. It's a very interesting story. Because the Sarvir Bharti wrote a very fine story when you think of it. And also you see the different kinds of people. The women themselves are very fascinating.
Yeah.
Each character, each of those three women. Within them you have people who sacrifice themselves, and people who are romantics, people who don't who don't go for the opportunity that is offered to them. So many aspects,
Yeah.
Right. And just from that, even in Suraj Ka Satvan Ghoda, the casting is very interesting. You have an ensemble cast where you have, likes of Amrish Puri and Neena Gupta, who have been in the industry, but you kind of give the bigger roles to Rajit Kapoor and Rajeshwari Sachdev, who are also newcomers. So How did that also happen, sir?
That depends entirely on their capability. Because I don't look at actors as stars in that sense. I look at stars as actors.
Of course.
Their ability to perform and their ability to get you to make you believe what they're doing. And that's very important in a film. If you can get that out, and now all these three actors, their work are outstanding actors.
Yes.
And they gave an excellent performance. Each one of them, whether it's Rajeshwari or Pallavi or Indira Gandhi, all three of them, they gave excellent performance.
And I was also talking about Amrish Puri, and you have worked with him in so many films. That scene, in front of the mirror when he's kind of putting the surma and he's wanting to go outside, he's, thinking there's a new lady whom I can kind of, predate on, if I think in that way. So, how has been this association with Amrish Puri? You have cast him in so many different roles, maybe his best roles.
Well, you see, Amrish, as you know, was a wonderful theatre actor.
Yeah.
But he was not a professional theatre actor. He actually made, I think he lit up most of the plays in which he acted. And they were also for Satyadev Dubey. They made a wonderful team. And often when Satyadev didn't have enough money to do a play, to do a production, Amrish would come in and put in the money. Because Amrish had already become, as you know, a very well-known villain at that time. So he often supported Satyadev in his production, And but he was an actor who was trained in the theatre. He's a very fine theatre actor. And according to me, a very fine actor, cinema, theatre.
Absolutely.
In anything. Although they tended to typecast him, but his capability was quite enormous. He did all kinds of things. And I wanted to make use of that aspect because he was essentially typecast. But I wanted him to break through that typecast. That's why in Suraj Ka Satvan Ghoda, the kind of things that he did. So it's not the typecast Amrish Puri that you would normally have seen in most of the mainstream films that he acted.
Absolutely.
Yes. So since we are talking about casting, we have always been interested to know your casting choices between Shabana Azmi and Smita Patil. Like they were both phenomenal actors who could perhaps do any role which were offered to them. So what was your thought process while casting them for one film and not the other, or different characters in the same film as, say, in Mandi?
Well, you see, or Nishant itself.
Or Nishant,
yes.
So you see, both of them, one was a trained actor. Shabana, as you know, is a trained actress. She went through a whole course of training as an actor. And she's meaning she works towards a role. She creates a role. She works out the profile of the role and then works towards it. She does it very, prepares for a performance.
Right.
That's it. It's almost a Stanislavski style of doing work. So she's a thoroughly professional actress. Now Smita was not an actress. She was not even planning in films or in the theatre. When I chose her, she was very diffident, as a matter of fact. She wasn't quite sure that she could act. No, but she was actually the opposite. She was a very spontaneous actor. She didn't worry too much about what she was doing. But somehow she was instinctively and intuitively an actress. There was a kind of intuitive understanding of the role she had to play. So the two completely different ways of approaching, but both of them worked very well. Because Smita was also an excellent performer.
Yeah.
Shabana, of course, was more sustained, much trained and so on. But Smita was much more spontaneous. But just being spontaneous is not good enough. You need also to understand the character you're playing, which she did. But she did that intuitively, rather than through kind of studied the pattern or the craft that she'd worked out for herself.
Right.
Did we hear it right when we heard that you first thought of Shabana ji for Bhumika and then it went to Smita Patil?
Yeah, but Shabana didn't have the time
Okay.
to do that part because she was already very busy and she'd already become a star and she had about 5 or 6 films in the pipeline. So she wouldn't have had the time for the kind of film that I was making. I needed a person who would be available to me at different times because it took time. It wasn't a film that I could shoot at one stage,
Right.
which is what I normally do. But in this case, it wasn't like that. It had to be shot in so many different ways, in different places, different times, all of that. But I needed the actor not to get distracted by everything else except the part that they were playing. So I didn't want the actor to be doing other things.
Right.
So which is why it was right for me to have taken Smita. And she gave an outstanding performance, as you well.
Absolutely.
She also won several awards apart from national awards, but international awards for that.
Right. And sir, if I ask you, among the contemporary makers of India today, whom do you follow? Whom do you look up to? Who impresses you?
There are many good filmmakers in India today. Many, but today what's happened is it's all got mixed up because one doesn't think of cinema in the same terms as used to think. Because today, it's all the manner in which films are being seen. They're not being seen in darkened halls on a big screen.
Yeah.
They're being seen in so many different ways. And therefore, you see, the medium itself is constantly changing. And the narrative styles are also changing. To take into consideration the manner in which you are likely to be consuming the product.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's very difficult. But if you ask me, I haven't really seen too many films in the cinema hall, like most people. You don't necessarily get the time because it's available to you at home, it's available to you on a laptop, and you can access anything you want. Because of the whole thing of going to see the film in the cinema, that whole ritual has disappeared. Having disappeared, there's a certain. So it's like you stop going to the temple. When you're growing up, or at least when I was growing up, it used to be a ritual to either Tuesday or Friday you went to the temple in the morning. I mean, not that you particularly believed in anything, but there was a certain social custom that involved that. So it was a performance. It was going to a performance. Cinema, as a performance art, now no longer has the same kind of quality like it used to have when you saw it in a cinema hall or a garden hall with lots of people around you on a large scale. Much of that has gone. Much of that has gone, which is a pity. Of course, it will come back. I know, because part of it is also due to the fact that last 2 years COVID has prevented people from going to the cinema. But it will happen, of course. But I've lost the connection. There used to be a connection, like going to the movies. That particular thing of going to the movies, that is, for me personally, it has happened in Scotland.
But then we are expecting a new film from you, sir, based on the discussions we were having that you are looking for some location and all.
Yes, no. I am making a film. In fact, a fairly big film.
Oh.
It's a biographical film on Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, which is a film we are making with Bangladesh. It's a Bangladesh co-production.
Okay.
In fact, it's a film in Bengali.
Oh.
Yes. So that is a film, and with the Bangladeshi actor who are absolutely wonderful. Wonderful actors, great actors there. And I've done about 70% of the film. I still have a little bit of work left to do, but that I can only do now once this COVID thing becomes less. And I can travel more freely without having to get quarantined in one place or another,
Yes.
So I'm hoping that all this will end very quickly and I can resume my filmmaking and have this film ready, because next year is an important year for in terms of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, because it's his 100th birth anniversary as well as 50 years of the freedom of Bangladesh
yes.
as a nation. Well, it was 50 years this year, but they're celebrating it over one whole year. So both of them will be celebrated with this film.
That's an amazing news. That will keep us on toes for the next few months.
Yeah. So anyway, I've got outstanding performances. Very good actors.
We have, yes.
Sir, thank you so much. It was such a surreal experience to actually talk to you in person. It was an honor, sir, to interact with you. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
It was an honor, sir. Yeah.